Thank you, Jim. Derek.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you both for your presentations. I just think I'll just stay on the rental piece first before I move to the affordable purchase. And I suppose from both of the presentations here today, we're talking about getting a pilot project up and running, which was announced in 2015. So I think we need to put that in context, that if we're going to actually really deliver cost rental in real terms that will make a significant difference to people in Ireland, we certainly can't do it at the pace that we're doing it at the moment. When I look at rents, we look at the Daft report and rent affordability and why this is so crucial, particularly in Dublin, but not just Dublin, it's all over the country. I'm sure both your agencies will be well aware of where rents are at. But in relation to rent affordability versus purchasing, like in areas like Walkinstown, Crumlin and Drimnagh, the average rent is now about $1,427 per month. To purchase a home, if one were able to get a mortgage for the same value of a home, it's about €710 per month. So you're looking at a difference of just over 100%. And that's how broken the rental market is. And that'll bring me back to affordable purchase in a moment, because why I believe a big part of resolving this will be allowing people to be able to buy their homes. And Jim, I'll come back to you specifically around the criteria and the affordable purchase scheme, because that scheme itself hasn't been fully agreed. So I'd be interested to get your take on it. Just from the NDFA, in the 4 schemes that you're assisting the local authorities on, O'Devany, Oscar Traynor, St Michael's and Ballymastone, have you concluded your financial model and your work on that with the local authorities now? I know they're engaging now in a tender stage, so you're happy that your financial model is completed, or is it open to further change? And I ask that in the context just in your presentation. If I take Ballymastone in particular, you've mentioned 20% proposed for affordable purchase. My understanding there's 20% social housing in that scheme as well. That's just not mentioned in that, so you might clarify. Also, in all of the schemes that are there, and this is a government model, one that my party don't agree with, is that we're looking at selling the remainder of that land effectively, and looking at, if you take Ballymastone, 60% will be private. If you take St Michael's Estate, 70% for proposed affordable rental. So the remainder of that, if I take Oscar Traynor, which has been a long time on the go now at this stage, 20% for affordable purchase. What's happening with the rest of it, and what does your financial model allow that to do? Can I ask about your interaction with the Land Development Agency? That's for both of you, with the LDA that isn't actually set up on a statutory footing as of yet, and we're still awaiting the legislation to see how that agency will actually operate. And I know, Jim, that you've mentioned specifically in the area of Naas and Skerries in Dublin, that's effectively additional sites for development to the Land Development Agency. What are they telling you that they want to do with those 2 sites? I've mentioned here cost rental housing. Is that cost rental housing for delivery based on the Enniskerry Road pilot? My question is, are we going to wait to see how the pilot runs or gets up and running in Enniskerry Road to then start delivering the other cost rental, and specifically as well with St Michael's Estate? I think when you look at rents of €1,200, and I understand you've answered that question earlier on, that it'll effectively, the rent that can be charged is just below market rate. It's not a whole heap below market rate in many of these areas if you look at the Q4 Daft report. So if we're delivering rents and cost rental at €1,200 per month, whilst it is welcome that it's less than the market rent, in a lot of areas it's not significantly less at all. You know, particularly in the areas where it's being built. So maybe the model in relation to the term of the loan, the term of the subvention needs to be looked at there. On the affordable purchase scheme, like, I'm just wondering about in your own agencies, with the housing agency in particular, when do you see the first affordable house actually being delivered? And this is a matter of great frustration for me. I don't want you to stray into a policy area, but negotiations around the increase of the service site fund to 310 million over 3 years took a lot of time, and that was not just to allow a reduction in cost, but was to establish the scheme. So I know the 4 Dublin local authorities have accepted and have approved some broad criteria around that scheme. But are you happy, Jim, that the scheme is clear enough for you that you're able to cost it properly? My final question around the affordable housing for the moment is the income threshold, and particularly the income threshold for couples. I've flagged this before, of it being set at €75,000, which is a good combined wage, but in many instances two people with decent jobs are going to be above that threshold. They find themselves in a situation whereby they're paying on average in Dublin about 40% of their net take-home pay in rent, if they're lucky enough to be able to rent. A single person in Dublin right now, based on the average income, is actually paying about 58.8% of their, and that's based on the DAFT report of the last quarter. That doesn't take into account the recent increases. Nearly 60% of their net take-home pay is in rent. So that's why I think it's really important that we give people other options around affordable rental, but particularly around affordable purchase. But if we're going to say to people above 75,000, we've 50,000 as the threshold for an individual, I think that's fair. But 75,000 for a couple, I think, will knock a lot of people out of an affordable purchase scheme. It is, I know, I'm told by the department that it's a matter that's under review by the Department of Finance at the moment. Would you be able to advise me as to where you believe that's at the moment? And is there a willingness to move above the €75,000 threshold, even allowing for regional affordability, like is what's allowed in HAP, which I'll turn to in a minute as well, where there's discretion allowed at a local authority level on the basis of the income level in that area, but also of the purchase price in that area. The affordable housing scheme that we have worked on and that previously worked would allow an equity stake, where you should be looking at to be able to sell houses for around €210,000, for between 160 and 210, but mainly about 210, 220, 230. So I'm wondering if you could update me as to when you see the actual establishment of that scheme across the country, but particularly in areas where we have affordability issues like Dublin, Cork, Galway, Waterford, and that's growing right across the country. Thanks.
I'll go to you first, Jim.
Right. Again, there's a range of different elements of that. Just in terms of I think your first comment about the pace in relation to Enniskerry Road, it did take a long time, and I think it would have been quicker. And I don't think the aspiration for other schemes in relation to delivery of cost rental, and you mentioned it in relation to the local land development agency sites. It's not the intention that everything stops and waits for results from Enniskerry Road. That's not the intention. Because even at that, how long do you wait after it's operational? So you need to press on, and that's definitely the aspiration of the Land Development Agency and the Housing Agency. Your more general point in relation to affordability and rent and mortgage, in many parts of certainly of Dublin, renting is potentially more expensive than obtaining a
9% more expensive.
So
it's
I suppose
significantly
it varies.
more expensive.
It varies in
but that'd be an average across Dublin.
Yeah. Going on then, just in relation to the interaction with the Land Development Agency, there's at least 3 sites that are going to be transferred to the Land Development Agency by the Housing Agency. One in Enniskerry, one in Skerries, one in Naas in a place called Devoy Park in Naas, very close to the local authority offices, and another one in Balbriggan. That's quite a large site actually, and more complicated in terms of planning. In terms of the interaction we've had extensive interaction with the Land Development Agency, and there's I suppose a good level of kind of shared vision in terms of trying to develop those sites. And the 2 I mentioned, which are the one in Skerries and the one in Devoy Park there in Naas, they're both kind of manageable size. They're both around 200 dwellings, and they'd be a mix of social and cost rental. So both of those sites would be, I suppose, retained in some form of state ownership going into the future. in terms of the level of how the transfer will be done, it's intended that the transfer from the agency will include various covenants which will place restrictions on how that will be developed into the
I
future.
suppose my question